Mesechus Menachos, there are 9 kinds of flour offerings, all to be found in the beginning of Vayikra, 9 different categories. So we're going to start off Menachos very similar to how we started off Zvachim. So it says Kol Menachos. So we know that by regular sacrifices you have 4 services. You have to do the Shrita, and you have to do accepting the blood and applying it on the altar, and then burning the sacrifice. So since we're dealing with flour offerings, we're not dealing with animal offerings. But they also have their 4 services. So the first one is called the kmitza, which we'll probably learn a lot about, is the scooping up of the flour. So now, menachos are brought for a variety of things. A sota brings a mincha, and swearing falsely you can bring a mincha. But then there's the minchas that you yourself want to donate to the temple. That there's 5 kinds, and the 5 kinds are divided up based on their different pans. You have the thinner pans, and you have the deeper frying pans. So, kol ha-menachos, all the menachos, shenikmetzu shelo lishman, you scooped up the flour, you did kmitza, shelo lishman, but you did it for a different reason. So, for example, let's say you committed to bring a minchas marcheshes. Well, minchas marcheshes is a kind of a pan. So it's a thinner pan. And then when the Kohen did the kmitza, he said, Hareini kometz l'shem machabas. Machabas is a deeper frying pan. So the kmitza was for one kind of pan, and he had in mind for a different kind of pan. So what happens? So that's still ksheros. It's still going to be a valid offering, meaning you can continue with your service and put it up on the altar. However, but the owner who was going to bring that sacrifice, he has to bring a new one, because at the end of the day, he was going to bring a marcheshes, a certain kind of frying pan, and instead the Kohen had in mind a different kind of frying pan. So therefore, he's still obligated to fulfill his obligation to bring that kind of offering. However, it's not going to be such an invalidation that you can't bring it up. You can still bring it up. So, except for chut minchas chote u minchas kinaos. So the minchas chote is brought for a certain kind of avera, such as becoming, I think, impure in the temple. If you can't afford to bring an animal, you'd bring a mincha. And the other one is a minchas kinaos. So kinaos is in the beginning of Masechta Sota. It talks about kinu v'stira, kinu that you get warned and then you seclude yourself. So it's called a minchas kinaos, the sacrifice you bring for violating the warning of not secluding yourself with another man. That's called a minchas kinaos. Those two, minchas chota, minchas kinaos, should come to shelo lishman if you do a knitza for the wrong reason. So instead of having in mind a minchas kenos, a sota, or a minchas chota for other violations, you have in mind, a voluntary mincha or something like that. So if you do any of those things for the wrong reason, shelo lishman. So now, whether you do the kmitza instead of doing it for one of these 2 flour offerings, you do it for another flour offering, so that's going to be totally invalid. Or nasan b'kli v'halach v'hiktir shelo lishman, or you put it into a vessel, or you walked, or you offered it up for the sake of a different sacrifice, that's also invalid. Or o lishman v'shelo lishman, you had both intentions at once. We'll see what that means in a second. Or the other way, o shelo lishman v'lishman, or you had the opposite way, 2 intentions. That's all going to be psulos. Psulos means invalid, and it's not going to be a good sacrifice. You cannot continue bringing it up. It's totally invalid. So, what does it mean? Ketza lishman v'shelo lishman. What does it mean? You had 2 intentions, one good and one not good. So, l'shem minchas chota, you had in mind for the sinner's flour offering. That's right, because that's what it's for. But then you also had l'shem minchas nedava. At the same time, you had also the intention afterwards is for a minchas nedava for the voluntary sacrifice, and that is going to be invalid. Now, Yeah, I believe Rashi. Anyways, Rashi points out, I believe here, that when it says here you have in mind, it means that you not that you kept it in your head, but you actually spoke it out. You actually verbalized it. Let's see here. Yeah, okay, somewhere here. So it's not that you kept it in your head, but you verbalized it, which is interesting. That the same Rashi said the same thing by Pigel. There by Pigel, it was a debate. Rashi and Tosfos said you have to actually verbalize it, or you can keep it in your head. But over here, I believe Rashi says that you have to speak it out, and keep it in your head would not be enough. Okay. Okay, I'll have to find it. I thought it was right here, but fine. Okay, so that's that. Now, so you had both of these, you verbalized both of these intentions, and therefore that's going to be invalid. Yeah. So having it with the wrong intention first, meaning you had in mind the voluntary offering, and then you had in mind the mitzvah, both of those are going to be invalid. And we had a debate in Zvachim, when you verbalize these two things, do you do after the first language or the second one? So here the Mishnah is telling you both ways is not going to be good. Whether you have the correct intention last or the correct intention first, that's not going to be good. Tosfos in a one-liner here points out from Zvachim that if you had, when you have no intention, harm intention, nothing, so that's like having a good intention. That was the conclusion of the second page of Zvachim. So, okay, now, the way the Mishnah phrased this was all the menachos that were scooped up, that were nikmatsu, for the wrong reasons, are all going to be good, except for it's not going to fulfill the obligation of the owner. So on that phraseology, the Gemara picks up. Lama lila misna ella. What's this whole thing? They're all going to be good, just rather they're not going to be good for his obligation. Just teach. Listening. Just teach very simply. Just say any menacha which is scooped up for the wrong reason, not for the reason that it was donated for a different frying pan, let's say, will not suffice to fulfill the obligation of the owner. Just speak like that, very simply. What's this whole? It's good, except for it's not going to be good for the owner. So hakamash malan, it's coming to teach you that but it's coming to teach you that that's the only thing that's not going to work for it. It itself is fine. It's a valid offering. It has sanctity, and you can continue on with your procedures of the different services. However, the only thing that's not going to be good for is going to be the fact that it's not going to suffice for the owner's obligation. He's going to have to bring another sacrifice. But the sacrifice itself, that's fine. Not only that, it's good, so good that you can't switch. Meaning, just because you had it in that, let's say you had one frying pan, you had one pan, and you had in mind a deeper frying pan, like we had from the marcheshes to the machabas. So don't say, well, once I had a wrong intention, so then I'll just keep going with the wrong intention. So if it's supposed to be, let's say, one will be the thinnest frying pan and 5 will be the deepest pan. So you're bringing a 1 and you had in mind a 5. Don't say, well, now that you had in mind the 5, you can keep going with the 5. No, you have to keep in mind everything you're doing because for the 1 and for a regular marcheshes and not a machabas, because it itself is a totally valid sacrifice. Not only that, it's prohibited to switch. The osir l'shnuya, you can't just say, well, it was a marcheshes. I had in mind a machabas. I'll just keep going with the machabas. No, you have to keep going with the other 3 services like it's a marcheshes, because it is a marcheshes. It's totally kosher sacrifice. The osir l'shnuya kidirav, it's prohibited to switch. Just because you messed up once, you don't keep going. So if you eat something that's a little bit that's not kosher and you only have 1 bite, you don't say, well, I'm already 1 bite in, just keep going. It doesn't work that way, right? So I hope not. The Amar Rava Ola Shishakta Shalishma, a Ola offering that was slaughtered. Right, so this all review of Zvachim. So an Ola that was slaughtered, Shelo Lishma, an Ola that was slaughtered for the wrong reasons, Aser Lizrog Dama Shalishma. you can't now apply the blood for the same wrong reason. So if you had in mind for an ola, a sin offering, so that's not good, but you can't continue going as if it was a sin offering. So how does Rava know this? Either through logic or through a pasuk. The svara is very logical. Why? Just because you messed up in area 1, you should keep messing up and switch in area 2, 3, and 4? Obviously not. The this also we had that when a person is gonna vow to bring a sacrifice, it says moti svasecha tishmor. You should keep your words. Make sure you keep your words. Guard your words. The asis, and you should do kasher nadarta, like you vowed. L'Hashem Elokecha nidava, and then it switches. So we know that there's two things. There's a neder and a nadava. One is this animal I have to bring, and one is it's upon me to bring the animal. If it's upon you and you lose the animal, too bad. You still have to bring an animal. If it's this animal that I'm vowing to bring, then if that animal gets lost, then you're good. So then you don't have to replace it. So why does the Torah switch from ka'asher nadarta, like you vowed, to bring the matana, bring the nedava, that gift offering, like you said? Why does it switch? So nadarta l'Hashem Elokecha nedava. Says the Gemara, nedava, nederhu. What are you switching to nedava? It's a neder. Says the Gemara to teach you the following. Kari le neder, the kari le nedava. This offering that you vowed to bring can sometimes continue being a neder, and sometimes it'll be a nedava. Ella im kamash nedarta sitza yehi neder. If you continue to do like what you're supposed to do, it's a neder. The imlav, if you ended up switching, so it's going to be considered a nedava, and you have to bring it, and you have to still bring it, even though you had a wrong intention, and now it's no longer that. Now you had in mind a different sacrifice, but you still have to bring what you vowed. Turning the page. The nedava mishari l'shneiba. Once it has the status of a nedava, now that it went from a neder to a nedava, meaning it's still valid. Just because you switched, it's still valid. Who says you can go and switch a nedava? You can't switch it. So even though it's a nedava now, but you can't switch it. So just because you had the wrong intention, but you can't switch it now to you can't switch it now and keep going with your wrong intention. So now this that we just said, that it's totally good, except for a minchas choten and minchas kinos. That whole section is going to be in disagreement with Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya Rabbi Leila Masisin de Rabbi Shimon. Let's suggest that our Mishnah is not going to be like Rabbi Shimon. Why? So the Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer Kol Menachos Shloshman Ksheros. Rabbi Shimon says, and the mincha which you did kmitza, you scooped up for the wrong intention, is going to be kosher. And now he argues the all of the bailim, the shem chov, and it will count. It will count for the owners for their obligation. You don't have to bring a new obligation. Why? Because the menachos are not similar to the sacrifices. You do kmitza on a machabas, on one kind of pan, but then l'shum marcheshes, but you have in mind a marcheshes. So says Rabbi Shimon, ma'aseha mochichin aleha l'shum machabas. So what that you had the wrong intention? Where are you placing the flour? In which pan? Pan A or pan B? So just because you had in mind pan B, but you're putting it in pan A. So your actions themselves prove what your intentions are. So we don't care that you actually spoke out something else or you had a different intention. That doesn't matter because we see your actions, and your actions themselves prove to us what you are trying to do. Okay, take care. L'shum machavas chareva. Let's say you have a dry mincha offering. So the sin offering is a dry mincha offering, meaning there's no oil there, but you have in mind that it should be a flour offering that has oil, like the rest of the flour offerings. So once again, that's going to be irrelevant for Shimon because why? Your actions themselves prove what you want to do. So if you end up putting it if you end up now putting in oil, so just because you had in mind oil, but that doesn't matter because your actions are proving to us what your thought process is. So l'shum chareva. So ma'aseh mochichin aleh l'shum chareva. Aval bezvachim eino kain. But by zvachim, by slaughtering animals, by animals, it's not the same halacha. Shchita achas lekulan. It's one shchita. So when you have in mind something else, that's not going to suffice for the owners because they had the wrong intention. And you can't say that, oh, your shchita shows us what you had in mind. No, it doesn't. It's one shchita for all the animals. V'zrika achas lekulan, and it's one application of the blood for the animals. The kabbalah achas lekulan, and it's one kabbalah for them. Yeah. So Rashi explains that we see that Rabbi Shimon argues in the Mishnah in two places. So first of all, our Mishnah said that the offerings that you had the wrong intention are not going to fulfill the owner's obligation. And Rabbi Shimon says it will fulfill the owner's obligation. That's one area where Rabbi Shimon seems to be in contrast to our Mishnah. And secondly, that our Mishnah invalidates totally a minchas choteh, the mincha of a sinner. If you have that wrong intention, that's totally invalid. And yet Rabbi Shimon doesn't differentiate. He says all the menachos with the wrong intention are going to be good, and they're going to count for their owners. So first, the counting of the owners, he argues on the Mishnah, and two is the two offerings that our Mishnah singled out, he grouped together. Now, we're going to see at the bottom of the page that Rabbi Shimon himself, there's going to be a contradiction in Rabbi Shimon. So, actually later on Gimel Amud Beis, and there's going to be a contradiction for what he holds, and there's going to be three answers to that contradiction. And now, each one of them are going to qualify a little more this opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And the question is, can one of those three answers for Rabbi Shimon, can we give the same differentiation between Rabbi Shimon and our Mishnah? So Rabbi Shimon is in contrast to our Mishnah. Later on, Rabbi Shimon's going to be in contrast to himself. That internal contradiction is going to have three answers. Can we use one, two, or three of those answers to answer the contradiction between Rabbi Shimon and our Mishnah? So we're only going to go one for three. Only Rav Ashi's answer to Rabbi Shimon's internal contradiction is going to be sufficient to answer the contradiction between Rabbi Shimon and our Mishnah, and the other two are not going to be sufficient. So says the Gemara, Hanichel Rav Ashi. It's good according to Rav Ashi. The Omar kan bekomet machabas l'shum marcheshes, kan bekomet minchas machabas l'shum minchas marcheshes. Rav Ashi over there, to answer the internal contradiction between the two Reb Shimons, he said it depends what you said. Did you say I'm going to have in mind? Let's say it's a machabas offering. Did you say that I'm going to have in mind for a marcheshes? But you didn't mention the word mincha. So you didn't mention, you said, I'm going to have, for this pan, I'm going to have in mind a deeper frying pan. Or you have in mind the mincha of a deeper frying pan, right? So that difference is going to make a world of a difference. So Rav Ashi says that since you don't say the word mincha, so then we don't really care. We don't really take you seriously. So therefore, that's not going to be an invalidation. However, when you have an offering that is for a machabas, for one kind of pan, and then you speak out that you want it to be for another minchas marcheshes, well, then that is going to be invalid. So once you have Rav Ashi, who answers an internal contradiction, maybe let's use that. Let's use that for our Mishnah. So, Hanichel Rav Ashi damer kan bekomets machabas l'shum marcheshes, and kan bekomets minchas machabas l'shum minchas marcheshes. So Masnisin will be mincha l'shum minchahi. Our Mishnah, which invalidates the minchas choteh and the minchas kinaos for the sota, and which says that the other flour offerings are not going to suffice to fulfill the owner's obligation. That's because when you had in mind, when you spoke out your intention, your invalid intention, you used the word mincha. Therefore, it's really going to be invalid. But this Reb Shimon that says it's all valid because you didn't say the word mincha. So what you said was irrelevant. So, okay. So that would be good according to Rav Ashi. Yeah. So now, but Rabba and Rava, Rabba and Rava, who have a different answer for Reb Shimon, their answers are not going to help us for our Mishnah. Rabba, Rabba, Ma'ikul Meimar. What are you going to say for Rabba and Rava? Which we're going to see, both at the bottom of this page and later on 3b and Gimel and Beis. Rabba, Rabba, Ma'ikul Meimar. There's no way to answer. Their answer is not going to help us. So is there any other way to reconcile Rabbi Shimon with our Mishnah or no? Maybe you'll say, Kan b'shinui kodesh and kan b'shinui bailim. Rabba answered the contradiction by saying it depends if you have the wrong sacrifice in mind or the Kohen had the wrong owner in mind. If the wrong owner in mind, that's invalidation. The wrong sacrifice in mind will not be an invalidation. So maybe that would be the answer to our Mishnah. The problem is though, Hamas and Shinui Kodeshu. Our Mishnah is talking about the invalidation where you had in mind a different sacrifice, and yet it said it was not good. The Katani, Keita Lishman B'Shal Lishman, Lishum Minchas Chota, Ulishum Minchas Nedava. So you see that you had in mind a different sacrifice, not a different owner, rather a different sacrifice. Okay. So the Inami Kidigamashani Rava, and maybe you'll say that the answer to Rabbi Shimon and our Mishnah is going to be like Rava suggested, that what kan bekomet mincha l'shum mincha and kan bekomet mincha l'shum zevach. Maybe when you have an offering, you have in mind a different offering, but it's in the same. It's still a different flour offering. That's going to be fine. If you have in mind a slaughtering, so you have in mind for a flour offering that you have in mind to slaughter an animal, well, that's going to be invalid. So, but you can't say that either. Why? Because Hamashis and Mincha. Our Mishnah is a Mincha l'shum mincha. Our Mishnah is a Mincha l'shum mincha. It's a flour offering for the sake of a flour offering. Therefore, and yet we see that's invalid. So therefore, Rava's answer is not going to help us. The Katani Shalasham Lishma, and as we see in our Mishnah, that when you have these wrong intentions, such as L'Shem Minchas Nedava and L'Shem Minchas Chota, it's within the flour world that you're having the wrong intention. So therefore, and yet it's still not going to be good. It won't be good for the owners. And by a Minchas Chota or a Minchas Sota, it's going to be totally invalid. So, what you have to say is that according to Rabba and Rava, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Shimon, but according to Rabbi Ashi, Rabbi Shimon could agree with our Mishnah. Okay, now what is this Rabbi Shimon that we just mentioned? The Rami, the Rabbi Shimon, other Rabbi Shimon. We're now going to ask a question, Rabbi Shimon on Rabbi Shimon. Titania, Rabbi Shimon Omer. It says in the verse in Vayikra that by the flour offerings, it says that the flour offering should be like Kodesh Kedashimi, Kichatas to Ka'asham. It's going to be very holy, like a Chatas and like an Asham. So what does that mean? Yesh men Kechatas, Yesh men Ka'asham. Some flour offerings will be like a Chatas, like a sin offering, and some will be like a guilt offering. Yesh men Ka'asham. Minchas Chota Harei Kechatas. The Minchas Chota, the one you bring for certain averas, for certain sins, that's going to be like a Chatas. Therefore, the Fikach, Kamsa Shalol Lishma, Psula. Therefore, when you do kmitza for the wrong intention, it's going to be totally invalid. Kechatas, like a chatas, which is in the first Mishnah of Zvachim. Minchas nidava, but a voluntary flour offering is going to be a rehu ke'asham. That's going to be like a asham, like a guilt offering. Lefikach, therefore, comes a shalosh shma. If you do kmitza for the wrong intention, it's going to be kishera uka asham. It's going to be valid just like a asham. Ma asham kasher ve'ena maratza. Just like an asham, if you have the wrong intention in mind, it's going to be a valid offering. Just the Einu Maratza, it's not going to cause appeasement to the owner, meaning the owner has to now bring another offering for his obligation, but yet the offering itself is good and you can put up on the altar. So af minchas nedava sheira the Einu Maratza. So too the minchas nedava, the voluntary mincha, is going to be kosher, and it's not going to but Einu Maratza, it's not going to cause appeasement. It's not going to fulfill the obligation of the owner. So what do you see from this? That Rabbi Shimon says that you have a chatas over here, a minchas chota, which is going to be invalid, like a chatas. Our Rabbi Shimon said, kol menachos, all menachos, including the minchas chota, are going to be valid if you had the wrong intention. So, what is the answer in this contradiction of the two statements of Reb Shimon? Yeah. So Amar Rabba, very simple. Lo kasha kan b'shinui kodesh and kan b'shinui bailim. When you have in mind another sacrifice, so a minchas chota, a flour sin offering, you have in mind another flour offering. That was the first Reb Shimon on the top of the page. That's fine. When the Kohen has in mind another owner, that's the second Reb Shimon. That's going to be invalid. Now, Amar le Abaye nichti. What's this differentiation between having in mind another flour offering and having in mind a different owner? What's the difference? Michti machshava de pasar rachmana hekeshehi mali shini kodesh mali shini bailam. It's a hekish that it's going to be invalid, just like a chametz is invalid. This is also invalid. So how can you differentiate between invalidation? To that, Rabbah says there's a big difference. That Amar le ma'aseha mochichin de ka'amar. That it depends. That when your actions show us what your intention is, so even though you have in mind or you speak out that you want to be for a different flour offering, but you end up putting it on the regular pan offering, so then that's not going to be an invalidation because we don't consider what you said to be valid when your actions totally contradict that. So that's why when you have the wrong intention, it's still going to be valid, even though by animal chatas it'll be invalid because over here you're putting the offering. Let's say a minchas chota has no oil, and you have in mind to put oil in, just like another, voluntary mincha offering. Well, if you're going to not put oil in now, we don't care that you said you're going to put it like a voluntary flour offering. Your actions show us what you mean. So, Ma'aseh mochikin, to come Rabbi Shimon, svarahi. Rabbi Shimon says that's a logical svara. Rabbi Shimon darish time of the graph. Famously, all throughout Shas, Rabbi Shimon is the one who expounds the reasons of the psukim. The reasons for the psukim and bases halachic decisions off of the reasoning of things. So Rabbi Shimon is darish time of the graph. He expounds based on the reasonings of different laws in the Torah, and therefore machshava de lo minkara pasal rachmana, but machshava de minkara lo pasal rachmana. Machshava, thoughts. Now, which Rashi points out here, it doesn't mean thoughts; it means speech. Interesting, Rashi waited till over here to tell us this, but he says that whenever it says machshava, thoughts, and it comes to sacrifices, what it means is emitting the words from your mouth. So and he brings a Gemara to prove his point. So says Reb Shimon that machshava, meaning speech, which delo minkara, that's pasal rachmana, but machshava de minkara lo pasal rachmana. So when you have in action, which is going to be the same, like slaughtering, it will be the same for all the sacrifices. So there, if you have something else in mind, it'll be an invalidation. However, machshava de minkara lo pasal rachmana, but a machshava that you can see the difference when you go and you do something against what you just spoke out. Your actions show us what you think. That is not going to be an invalidation, and that's going to be that first Reb Shimon, where